Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norse Witch, and this week's video is a book review on the book Travels Through Middle-earth, The Path of a Saxon Pagan by Alaric Albertsson. To preface this, really shortly, yes, this is a sponsored video, this is a paid review. I want to say this before I start the video, but I wouldn't have accepted the offer for a paid review if I wouldn't have liked the book. So I definitely made sure that it's clear that I'm still going to tell you my honest opinion on the book. I won't sugarcoat things just because this is a paid review. And I made sure that I already read a good chunk of the book before I even agreed to do this paid review, so that I know what I'm getting myself into. I wouldn't have wanted to review a book that I generally don't like, especially if it's a paid review. So don't worry, I'm not telling you that this is a great book just because this is a paid review. I'm still 100% honest. I would never review a book and tell you that it's good if I actually don't like it. And I will still give you my honest opinion. There are negatives about this book. I think there are negatives about any book out there. And I will honestly tell you what I dislike about the book. So don't you worry, it's still 100% my honest opinion. But yeah, thank you very, very much to Cross Crow Books for this opportunity. This is the first paid book review that I've ever done, and the second sponsored video that I've ever done, so I'm very flattered that they approached me. And yeah, I had a lot of fun reading this book. So let's get into it. As I said, the title is Travels Through Middle-earth, The Path of a Saxon Pagan. So you already see what I'm getting at. This is about Anglo-Saxon paganism, not about Norse paganism. But there are a lot of overlaps between Anglo-Saxon paganism and Norse paganism. And yeah, that is why I still decided to do this book review. Also because I have previously I had no clue about Anglo-Saxon paganism. This is the first book that I've ever read on the matter, and I was very, very interested to see how much overlap there is with Norse paganism and where the differences are. So this is why I very, very much enjoyed reading this book. But let us first read the blurb, shall we? Alaric Albertsson's Travels Through Middle-earth, The Path of a Saxon Pagan is a beautifully written book that tells the reader how to incorporate these old pagan beliefs into modern magical practice. The book itself serves as a bridge to the past, connecting the reader to folklore, traditions, and rituals of the Anglo-Saxons in a way that is both comforting and familiar, while still engaging enough to help the reader add depth to their practice. Contained herein are instructions for performing the hussel, which is a ritual designed to honor one's ancestors, the gods, and the elves and dwarves. Also included are observations on Anglo-Saxon cosmology, the Virt and its connection to fate, seasonal tides and ways to celebrate them, rites of passage, worship, and magic. This book is truly a must-have for anyone seeking alignment with the old ways of the Anglo-Saxons. So as you can see, as you have guessed probably from the blurb, this is a beginner's book to Anglo-Saxon paganism. And I would agree with that. This is definitely a good beginner's book because there's basically everything you could ever need to begin your practice. It's all in this book. So this is definitely, to preface this, a great beginner book, but I still feel like there are very good points and discussions on specific topics for intermediate pagans. So if you don't identify as a beginner pagan, doesn't matter if a beginner Saxon pagan or whatever pagan, there is still very, very interesting takes in this book. So I would still encourage any intermediate pagan to read it. But yeah, let us now dig into the content. So what's actually in this book? I will quickly read the chapters for you so that you know what you're getting into. We have the chapters Who Were the Anglo-Saxons? So that is a general overview on who the Anglo-Saxons actually were. The Old Gods, of course, the chapter on the gods. The Veofod. Then we have a chapter on honor and Virt. The Elves. Very, very good chapter. I love that chapter. Those who have gone before. So a chapter on your ancestors. The Magic of Middle-earth. So it's a short chapter on magic. Mead Made Simple, a mead-making chapter. I loved that. Gathering at the Hearth, Holy Tides and Rites of Passage. And of course there is a glossary and a big bibliography. Very good overview, basically everything that you would need. The only thing that I feel like is missing a little bit which maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm a Norse pagan and maybe that's just not that much of a concern for Anglo-Saxon pagans. But I would have liked a very short chapter on inclusiveness, like how to be an inclusive pagan and how to avoid problematic sources and problematic groups. I feel like that's important nowadays, but yeah, this is by the way, this is a revised edition. I think the original was from 2009, so this is a revised edition, and I feel like in 2009, I don't think any book had a chapter on inclusiveness, so maybe that is why. But yeah, as I said, apart from that, everything that you would need. The first thing that stood out to me was definitely that there is a foreword by Christopher Panczak, and if you've seen my channel, you probably know that I really like Christopher Panczak's books, so I already really liked that. And then there's a small little chapter on, like as a foreword for the revised edition, where the author kind of reflects a little bit on the old version and what he changed and stuff. He openly admitted that in the first book he very much focused on his own practice, but in the revised version he wanted to be more inclusive towards what other people were doing. So that is where he apparently changed a lot of stuff. And he also worked with a lot of people from all over the world on the revised copy, and I really loved that. That way he got like points of view from people from different cultures. He got like multiple people from all over the world to help him with the revised version, so that is great. I really liked the book. I kind of devoured it because it's a very easy read. It's not the thickest book, so you will get through it pretty quickly, and it's easy to read. Even for someone who is not a native English speaker, it's easy to read, it's a quick read, and the way that the author describes things and also describes more complicated matters is very easy to understand. So for me, as a German person, that was just very lovely. I was able to read through it very smoothly. The writing style is more sincere, I would say, but there are some jokes here and there which you just don't really expect. So it's a more sincere writing style, but then all of a sudden there's a joke in there, or like throwing some shade at some people, which I really loved because it kind of softened things up a little bit. It made it more easy and funny to read, I would say. The book is also very honest and realistic, so it doesn't try to kind of sell brose-true fantasies to you or anything like that. It's realistic. I mean, the book itself is meant to be a book on how you can incorporate these religious views and these practices into your daily life. So it's definitely realistic, honest, and not a living brose-true fantasy. The author also shares a lot of my views and opinions on things, which was really lovely to see because some of my views and opinions usually aren't shared by authors of like Norse pagan books. So it was really nice to see that a lot of my views and opinions were reflected in that book. There's also lots of good historical information, which in my opinion is very important, to not just say like, yeah, it is like this, period, but to say it is like that because we see historically, or because we know that there are these and these historical finds, archaeological finds. So there's lots of good historical information to back his views and opinions up, which I feel like is very important, and I definitely loved that. There are chapters that aren't necessarily in every beginner book. So I mean, for example, a chapter on how to brew mead, which I found genius because I've never seen that in a paganism book. So definitely loved things like that. You don't really expect them, so it's not like the normal standard beginner book. As I already said, there is a chapter about deities and of course a chapter about other entities in the book, and I really love those because there are viewpoints in there that I personally share and that aren't shared that often, and there are also entities covered that aren't usually in all of the paganism books. For example, house spirits. I don't see the topic of house spirits covered in every single Norse paganism beginner book, and I really loved seeing that in this book. I really loved the takes of the author on things like what makes a deity, like why is this deity a deity and not a Jotun, for example. Mixing deities from different pantheons, that's covered in the book, which I find amazing. Also what the dark in dark elves means, like dwarves are dark elves, and what does the dark in dark elves mean? Does it mean they're bad or evil or whatever? Very good viewpoint about that. I love that. And I also really loved that people who maybe have a more unusual practice are also mentioned in the book. For example, like people who don't focus on working with gods or goddesses. There are pagans who don't work with gods and goddesses, and that is totally fine. And that is mentioned in the book and explained in the book. And I really, really loved seeing that, because most of the times the focus is just on gods and goddesses, but there are so many more entities to explore. And in this book, he actually also describes how to get in contact with those deities, how to give offerings to those deities, how to approach them. And yeah, I just generally really love those chapters. Then the chapter about magic, I mean, it's a paganism book. It's not a witchcraft 101. So I didn't expect the magic chapter to be very, very big, and it's not. It's a very short introduction on kinds of magic that you could incorporate into your practice because they are connected with Anglo-Saxon paganism. So of course, for example, runes are in there, but in general, it's a very short thing, not a lot of actual instructions on how to practice this kind of magic, more of a, this is there, and then you have this, and then we have this, and you could do this, and you would have to do more further research in different books or on different websites if you want to actually practice these types of magic. So it's more of an introduction to magic. But what I personally really loved to see was that in the part on the runes, the author mentioned the rune poems, and of course there's like a description on every single rune, and the actual rune poem is in there. Like for every single rune, you have the section on the rune from the Anglo-Saxon rune poem, and I love that so much because that way you can not only read about the author's view on the runes, because there's always a lot of UPG in books about runes or chapters on runes, but you can also read the original rune poems and make up your own view on the runes. And I really love that. Unfortunately, there are not that many rune books or rune chapters that include the rune poems, so I really loved seeing that. And then again, I already mentioned it, I really loved the chapter on making mead and brewing mead. And I definitely loved the approach that the author used on brewing mead, because it's not like you need this expensive thing and this and this and this, and you spend like hundreds of dollars or euros or whatever, a lot of money on stuff to make the mead before you can actually make it. It's more of an easy approach, a more affordable approach. That's maybe not like the prime mead that you can brew. It's more easy to start with it before getting properly into it and spending hundreds of euros. So I really, really love that, and I'm actually thinking about trying it. Then of course there are the chapters on rites of passage and like the holidays that you can celebrate. I especially love the chapter on the holidays because it kind of takes the Wiccan holidays and then dissects them and looks at which holidays are actually from which practice, like which ones are from Ireland, which are from Wales maybe, which ones are actually from Scandinavia, kind of dissects them all and looks at which traditions that are usually used for these holidays are actually from which traditions. I really love that. Also, like throughout the book, there are always examples on how you can do things. So for example, about deities and other spirits, there are examples on how you can approach them, how you can communicate with them, how you can hold a husel for them. I think for each and every rite of passage, there is a husel that you can hold for that. I really like that. If you struggle with kind of making up your own bloats or husels or other types of rituals, then you will like this book because there are a lot of examples and you can either use these examples as they are or you can go off of them and use them to create your own rituals. But then lastly, of course, as I already said, no book is perfect. There are always negatives. I only found a few, fortunately, which I really liked. Otherwise, as I said, I wouldn't have agreed to make this review. But these are the things that I disliked about the book. In general, in some points, it's not as inclusive as I'd like. For example, sometimes the author says or writes things like, this and that is never done, or nobody does it. So it's a very harsh, like, nobody does it. There are so many people in this world. There will probably be someone who does it differently. Sometimes the language isn't perfect, so sometimes it's not as inclusive as I'd like. But in other places he writes things like, there's no one true way to practice. I guess it's better in some places and worse in other places. Also, it's a little bit heteronormative. So for example, it mentions a family as being a mother, a father, and a child. there are other families. There are families with 2 moms and 2 dads, for example. So sometimes just not as inclusive as I'd like. I guess those parts are probably just aged badly, I guess. Then in another part, the author mentions the 9 noble virtues and gives like a set of values that is inspired by the 9 noble virtues without mentioning the problematic source where the 9 noble virtues comes from. At least it's not the original 9 noble virtues. I hate seeing the 9 noble virtues mentioned in books because they were codified by folkish groups or like founders of folkish groups. So at least they're not the original 9 noble virtues, but still I feel like if you mention them, you should give some explanation on why you shouldn't work with the original. Because how are readers, especially beginners, supposed to know that the original 9 noble virtues are problematic or come from problematic people if no books mention that? And the same actually goes with Theism. So like Theism is mentioned as a group with which you can practice if you want to practice in a group. Yeah, in my opinion, if you mention Theism or any other group that has some kind of problematic people in it, maybe you should give an explanation, at least mention that they are a little bit problematic. But yeah, I don't know if maybe that part was from the original from 2009 and maybe in 2009 all these allegations towards the Theists, they haven't come up yet. I don't know that, but yeah, that would have definitely been something that I would have added in the revised edition. In general, still, as I said, I think it's a great beginner book and also a great intermediate book. As I said, it was just extremely interesting to see where Anglo-Saxon paganism and Norse paganism overlap, where the differences lie, like how different things are called in Anglo-Saxon paganism even. While I am filming, the special edition hardcover and the signed paperback editions are still available, so you can still order them. The normal paperback version will probably be available from February 2023, so you can pre-order it already. It will probably be shipped out in February. But yeah, that is what I will leave you with for today. Before I end this video though, as always, a patron shout out. Thank you very, very much to Ingi, Bresky, Prince Edlin's boyfriend, JB, Karina, Tim, Anna, Cuboid, Maud, Alexander, Laura, Amber, Kristen, John, Ivy, Phoenix, Anton, Noemi, Jenny, Tyler, Els, Betty, Misty, Cameron, Tiffany, Amy, Colette, Soren, Braden, Tell, Timothy, Coffee, the honorary gossip squirrel, Bjorn, Scylla, Ash, and Lucy. Thank you very, very, very much. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up. And of course, check out my Instagram and my TikTok for my other shenanigans. Of course, check out my online shop. And if you maybe even want to consider supporting my channel, then you can check out my Patreon. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!